Clive Hale from the ABC National Newsroom. Good evening. Thank you for joining us. Heading late edition tonight, news of a slump in business investment. Federal Treasurer Ralph Willis has shrugged off today's figures, which show a 5% business investment drop in the 3 months to March, an all-time low. A surge in investment is central to the budget strategy, but Mr. Willis says it can still be achieved. The opposition says the government's plans are now in deep trouble.
The federal government says it expects business investment to jump from 1% this financial year to 14.5% next year. While it's too early to write off that forecast, economists say today's proof of declining investment means business is lacking confidence for other reasons. And that's a view shared by the new leader of the opposition.
In the end, the cost structure in Australia is a cost structure which is anti-competitive and unattractive to business investment.
This graph shows business investment as a proportion of our GDP, the sum total of all we produce as a country. What it shows is that investment is at an historic low. Forecasters Access Economics produce a regular investment monitor. That survey indicates there are no signs the long-awaited investment is about to occur.
Companies build up debt by very large amounts in the late 80s, and they've been focusing on paying off debt rather than investing in new buildings and equipment.
If there's any good news from today's results, it's that poor investment means there's less incentive to raise interest rates.
As questions are raised about his economic policies, the Prime Minister has intensified his criticism of the new opposition leader. In an interview tonight, Mr. Keating cast doubts on Alexander Downer's attitude to women, calling on Mr. Downer to resign his membership of South Australia's exclusive Adelaide Club.
1894, no leader of a party that wants to be Prime Minister of this country should be a member of a club that will not have women as members.
And Mr. Downer will be announcing his new shadow front bench lineup in Brisbane tomorrow. The opposition leader held a day of top-level coalition talks in Adelaide today, but is remaining tight-lipped about his plans. He's also refused to be drawn on what job he may offer former Liberal leader John Hewson.
The more the opposition changes, the more Tim Fischer remains the same.
Well, let me just simply say the Glenelg tram's back on the tracks, and the coalition is back on the tracks.
And with that, the Nationals leader steamed off to a meeting with Alexander Downer to consolidate his party's place in the new compact coalition front bench. Also still in doubt this morning, a place for John Hewson.
I don't know at this stage whether he would like to or not, so I await his call.
I've spent a lot of time in economic areas, maybe a non-economic portfolio, the arts and communications or tourism.
And later in the morning, new Deputy Peter Costello emerged to reveal Mr. Downer and his predecessor had now talked.
We've had, obviously, some discussions with Dr. Hewson, and they've been very productive.
Alexander Downer has offered John Hewson a front bench position, and senior coalition sources say it must be an economic portfolio. With Peter Costello already claiming the Shadow Treasurer's job, that means the former opposition leader could end up as finance spokesman. The question is, has Dr. Hewson accepted the offer?
Jim Middleton. International Olympic Committee Chief Juan Antonio Samaranch has arrived in Sydney to check the progress of preparations for the 2000 Games. Mr. Samaranch flew in this evening. It's his first visit to Australia since Sydney won the Olympic bid. During his 3-day tour, he'll inspect the Homebush site and meet top Olympic organisers.
We will present to the world in the year 2000 wonderful winners.
Thank you.
On Friday, Mr. Samaranch will visit Melbourne, where he'll be presented the key to the city. Long-distance phone carrier Optus will speed up its push into the market for local phone calls in a move that increases the pressure on rival telecom. Optus says it could start rolling out local call services from next year, 2 years earlier than expected. The company says it's also looking at offering other information and entertainment services, such as pay TV. Now to finance news, and on the share markets today, the All Ordinaries closed down more than 26 points after weaker bond trading. Overseas, Tokyo's Nikkei was up 41 points, Hong Kong's leading index was up 84, and in New York the Dow was also up slightly, while gold fell more than $3. The Australian dollar made modest gains against the greenback and the yen, but was steady on the trade-weighted index. Well, last year they were hunted by armed death squads. This year they're hunted by ravenous wolves. At least that's the way one welfare agency is depicting the plight of homeless young people. The original TV advertisement was so shocking it was banned by some networks, but it proved a very successful money spinner. So this year the Open Family Group is out to shock again.
This is the ad which caused an outcry last year with its depiction of street kids being hunted by armed men.
Wolves! Wolves! Wolves!
And this year's offering is a variation on the same theme. This time, the homeless being chased by packs of wolves.
We're using a combination of shock therapy, of provocation, evocative advertising. Call it what you like. It's intended to stop people in their tracks and make them think.
Open Family says last year's ad raised $350,000, despite being banned by most television networks. And it defended the use of shock tactics.
If you saw the real thing, which we see in the street, then I'd be prepared to listen to your complaints about whether it should go to air.
The street kids who feature in the commercial say the depiction is not extreme.
Especially with the police, they're always after you. Even if you don't do anything wrong, they're always after you. The police are just like the wolves.
One of the groups which objected to last year's ad was the Salvation Army, which gave cautious approval to this year's use of symbolism.
You can't have wolves in Victoria, so it's symbolism. And so because people know it's symbolism, I've got more sympathy with this ad than with one where you've got people hunting with guns.
The nationwide campaign will run for 2 months, targeting television, radio and newspapers.
Overseas now, and fierce artillery battles are raging tonight in the Rwandan capital Kigali, delaying talks between a special UN envoy and the government. One shell hit a Red Cross hospital, killing 2 aid workers and wounding several others. But in spite of the fighting, some talks have proceeded, as the UN discusses plans to deploy 5,500 new peacekeepers to the troubled nation.
When government troops pulled out of this base, they left behind an arsenal of heavy weapons and ammunition, which the rebels will now use against them. With Kigali's airport now under their control, the rebels tell UN commanders they will not interfere with relief flights. UN soldiers based at the airport are guardedly optimistic.
Yeah, he has come here to talk.
But the situation here could change again if government forces decide for some reason to shell the airport. Government troops in Kigali are reported to be mobilizing for counterattacks, while the rebels consolidate their newly won positions, bringing in large numbers of reinforcements to close in on the capital. Beyond the hundreds of thousands already killed in ethnic massacres, the war between government forces and rebels is killing many civilians. With no prospect of a ceasefire soon, there will now almost certainly be an escalation of fighting for the capital and thousands of new casualties.
Now to other foreign news in brief, and officials at NATO headquarters in Brussels are said to be relieved tonight after Russia's decision to join the alliance's Partnership for Peace without political conditions. And at an International Whaling Commission meeting in Mexico, Japan is seeking middle ground between a proposal to turn the Southern Ocean into a whale sanctuary and its own plans for a smaller, safe zone for whales. Back home, the battle is looming over who'll control the South Australian Marine Sanctuary for whales at the head of the Great Australian Bight. Under current plans, the marine park will be managed jointly by the South Australian Departments of Primary Industries and Mines and Energy. But conservationists are unhappy. They want the entire area declared a hands-off haven.
5 years ago, the Bannon government promised protection for these mammals in the form of a marine park at the head of the Bight. Last year, under the Labor government, the boundaries were drawn up for the park, but since then, little has happened. Now, conservationists are becoming increasingly impatient, especially as they fear the park may be managed by the Departments of Mines and Energy and Primary Industries.
Miners have a tendency to only be looking, and then when they find something, they want to dig and prospect in a sort of a heavier fashion. So we think that they need to take a view that this is an area, it's a special, unique area that needs to be set aside to allow the southern right whales total sanctuary.
Greenpeace says the area should be declared a sanctuary, similar to that proposed for Antarctica.
We think that the area can be used as an economic resource in a very soft and eco-tourist sensitive way, but mining intrusion would obviously negate all of those sort of more gentle approaches.
Mines and Energy Minister Dale Baker has declined to talk about the park developments, adding any comment just now might polarise a number of interest groups.
Federal colleague and Shadow Environment Minister Chris Gallas believes joint management between mines and energy and primary industries can work.
Everybody always has to make accommodations. You can't have it all one way and all the other way. But first of all, we've got to make sure we have that park that does protect the breeding and calving ground, and maybe mines and energy then have to make accommodations so that that is safe.
Greenpeace has united with 2 other conservation groups. They will begin a campaign for a hands-off haven for the whales when the mammals return to the Bight this month or early June.
Now let's take a brief check of tomorrow's national weather for you. Continuing windy over southeastern Australia, with some showers for Melbourne, for Hobart and Adelaide, mostly fine in Perth and Canberra, and fine in the other capital cities. Late edition news, I'm Clive Hale. We're back for you again tomorrow. Join First Edition at 7 for breakfast news, and meantime, you have a nice evening. Good night.